The face says it all. That was awesome. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Bristol Motor Speedway, the world's fastest half mile. Thunder Valley, the last great coliseum of racing. It has all the nicknames. And it's a racetrack that, under the lights, every time we go there for night racing at Bristol, it can always put on a phenomenal show for the fans. Maybe not so much for the drivers if they get into some tussles out there. But what sometimes we always hope for Bristol is some very good racing. And ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in quite a while, we got one hell of a show under the lights last night in an elimination race where we knew that 12 drivers would advance, 4 would not advance. And we know exactly who's moving on and who isn't. One driver comes out on top and returns to victory lane for the first time in, since March? Let's get into all that happened at Bristol. Number 1, ring the bell! Christopher Bell wins the Bass Pro Shops night race at Bristol Motor Speedway, holding off a challenge towards the end of the race by Brad Keselowski for the victory, holding off Keselowski, Zane Smith, Ryan Blaney, and Joey Logano for the win. Christopher Bell's first career Cup Series win at Bristol Motor Speedway, and the first time that this guy has won a race since March earlier this year. Now, the reason why I bring that up, what happened after race 1 of the season that William Byron won the Daytona 500? Christopher Bell went on a hot streak, winning 3 races in a row. Atlanta, Circuit of the Americas, and Phoenix. Then ever since then, he went cold turkey. They had some good runs here and there. They had some relatively fast race cars and had some good solid results, but they weren't winning races. And it felt like there was an opportunity for them last week at Gateway where they certainly had a car capable of winning, if not competing with his teammate Denny Hamlin for the win at the end. But they had a slow pit stop towards the end of the race on that last green flag run, and they didn't get the best restart, and it led Christopher Bell to be a little bit upset with his team on the radio, saying, these cars are junk, I'm not happy, I'm very upset, this performance by his team is absolutely unacceptable, we gotta do better than that. And that's coming off of a relatively bad performance from Darlington the week prior, where after they had contact with Carson Hocevar leaving pit road under yellow, it hurt their splitter, and they were never competitive the rest of the night. They were able to somewhat bounce back with that top 10 last week, as well as the stage points, but it left a sour taste in Bell's mouth, thinking that they could have had a chance to win. Well, last night, they made up for it. And Bell, for most of the race, was inside the top 5, top 10, top 15, a lot of the night. Didn't really make a whole lot of noise of the race until the very end when it mattered most. You know, he had some good long run pace in the car when he certainly had the tires to go along with it, and we're going to get into tires a lot later in this show. But he just kind of hung around for a lot of the night, just trying to wait and see what would happen, waiting for the cautions to come out at the right time so we could put on some tires and get some track position with those tires on the restarts before going into management mode. But he just pretty much hung around the top 5, top 10 for a lot of that race. And then we get into the final stage. He finds himself up towards the front, the battling for the win towards the end with his teammates and Chase Briscoe and Ty Gibbs, as well as other guys that were looking for their first win of the season, their first career win, or in this case, a guy like an Alex Bowman trying to win to advance to the next round of the playoffs. Well, Christopher Bell was able to come in and take tires on the last caution of the night when Bubba Wallace got tapped by Cole Custer, who was slowing down through turn 3 right in front of the leader, Brad Keselowski. Custer got into Bubba, sent Bubba up into the wall, brought out the caution, and for the guys that had not yet had their last set of tires put on, Bell as well led a few others to pit road, and he was the first one off. And Bell got in a really good restart with about 5 laps to go, especially when the top 2 on the front row, Zane Smith and Carson Hocevar, both searching for their first Cup win at the time, both carried up the track because they didn't have a lot of grip in their tires that they had already used a couple laps prior before these guys put their tires on. Bell was able to get by them, drive away, but he had the 6 car, Brad Keselowski, closing him on at him at the very end of the race. And despite a last lap dive bomb into turn number 3 to apply the bumper to the rear of Christopher Bell, Bell stayed in the gas. Obviously, I'm sure he shifted in the car to keep control of it and was able to carry that thing off turn number 4 and get the victory lane and getting his 4th win of the season. And by the way, a clean sweep of the round of 16 for Joe Gibbs Racing. There's nothing else to say other than outstanding performance by Joe Gibbs Racing. They kicked everybody's butt in the opening round of the playoffs. And for a guy like Christopher Bell, who's been good at Bristol in the past couple years since he came in the Cup Series, for him to not win in any of those races in that time span is pretty shocking, because the way he run up up the racetrack against the wall, especially when it comes to it running a little bit like a dirt race and somebody you're up against the wall getting that extra momentum off the corner. Even though the high side was never a factor last night due to the racing product that was given to us, especially with tires, Bell made the most of it at the very end of the race and got the job done, getting the 20 team to victory lane. And obviously they had a pretty good points cushion entering the night as long as they were able to do the right things, not make mistakes on pit road. They would put themselves in position for a solid run. At the end of the night, it's a win, his 4th win of the season, and with this win, kind of should get momentum back on their side. As I mentioned, after he won 3 races in a row this year, he went cold turkey for a long time with no wins. Even though they've had cars capable of doing it, there have been times where maybe luck was on their side or they weren't running as well. But after the rough outing at Darlington, the tough ending to them last weekend at Gateway when they thought they had it, they were able to bounce back with a big win last night, and I guarantee you these next couple races in the round of 12, where Bell has definitely run well at before, including winning at New Hampshire. The Roval could be a good round for him. Get more of those bonus points and help him get closer to getting back into the championship 4 after he missed it last year due to his mistake on the last lap at Martinsville. But at the end of the night, Christopher Bell rings the bell. He's victorious in the night race at Bristol. Number 2. So close. 3 guys were so close to breaking through last night for their either first win of the season or first career win. And a couple of those guys really thought they had a chance. Starting off with the 6 car Brad Keselowski runner-up to Christopher Bell. My goodness, you cannot blame Brad Keselowski for not trying on that last lean flag run at the end of the race to try to get the 20 of Christopher Bell out of the way. And Brad Keselowski for a lot of the night was kind of quiet around the top 15, 20, even with all the differing strategies and changing of positions because of tires and everything. But he had a very good car for the majority of the night. And then we got into the final 100 laps of the race. He became a factor inside the top 5 to the point where in the first stint of green flag pit stops in the final stage, or the final long green flag run that we had until the last yellow, Brad Keselowski was able to take the lead actually. It looked like he was going to be on his way to winning, but then realized that the tires were burning up. He realized, I got to come in. I got to put on my last set. But unfortunately, a couple of guys were trying to, gamble and go further. It looked like actually Brad maybe could have managed his tires to the end of the race, but when that caution for Cole Custer and Bubba Wallace came out and brought everybody to pit road, Brad unfortunately got beat by the 20 of Christopher Bell. But like Bell, he was able to get a good restart and get by the guys that stayed out on that last caution and tried to run Christopher Bell as best he possibly could and gave him the tapped into turn number 3 to try to move him out of the way. But Bell throttled it and he didn't back down, and unfortunately, oh so close for Brad Keselowski. I mean, remember 3 years ago in this race, he had a chance to win until he had a tire problem that took him out of it. But it was a good bounce back for Brad Keselowski. And again, they didn't make the playoffs this year, but they have been getting their program better ever since that Coca-Cola 600 where he finished in the top 5 earlier this year in May. They've been on a roll with some really good results as of late, and they could keep the momentum going, and it could give them some confidence for 2026. And who knows, they could still win one more race before the year is all said and done, but so close for Brad Keselowski. As for 2 other guys that were trying to get their first career win, they came so close, but it wasn't there on their side. I'm going to start first with Ty Gibbs. By far, he was the best car last night, aside from probably his teammate Chase Briscoe. Ty Gibbs, still searching for that first career Cup Series win, had a strong horse from the get-go last night. They were up front, leading a lot of laps at the beginning of the race. They held their track position for a lot of the night. Then they would get shuffled back, then work their way back up, then got shuffled back, then worked their way back up, and so on and so on and so on. But a lot of the race last night was led by that 54 car Ty Gibbs. They had good pace, especially when they were out front, and could manage their tires compared to everybody else who was in the middle of the pack racing for position while burning up their tires. Gibbs had good pace in that 54 last night. But on the next to last pit stop of the night, which was under green flag stops with about, I'd say, 50 laps to go, Ty Gibbs is following his teammate Chase Briscoe coming onto pit road, and Gibbs slid the tires so hard trying to get down to the apron of the racetrack to slow the car down that it popped the right front tire and carried him back up the track. He missed the entrance to pit road and had to circle around, and ultimately took him out of contention for the race win. And I feel like that's the testament of not only just worn tires, but the pressure to try to get your first career Cup Series win, because you know it's still on you. You haven't won that Cup race yet. You are former Xfinity Series champion, and you have talent. You know you have it, and you know that your team has gotten better ever since the tough start to 2025. But the pressure, I feel like, kicked in, especially with that worn tire that he was on there. and it popped the right front tire. He went up the track. He had to circle around. Luckily, it didn't bring out a caution, although it probably would have loved it, so maybe he'd stay on the lead lap and hold his track position for the most part. But it dropped him a couple laps behind. Eventually, he was able to take the waiver on that last caution. All he could get was a 10th place finish out of it. It was a tough moment, though, for Ty Gibbs, because he definitely looked like he had the car that was capable of winning last night. But at the end of the night, he made a mistake. It came back to bite him, but he was able to recover for a 10th place result. And then Zane Smith with a 3rd place result, his second highest finish in his Cup Series career. Of course, the other being a 2nd place finish to Joey Logano last year at Nashville. What a performance by Zane Smith in that 38 car for Motorsports. Running up front pretty much a lot of the night last night. I don't think they qualified particularly well, but they had a good car. They were able to pass guys, and when we had those early caution in the middle of green flag pit stops in the first stage, I think it helped Zane Smith gain track position that put him inside the top 10, and he was around the top 10, 15 the entire night. I mean, Front Row Motorsports, you got to give them credit. They gave Zane Smith a really fast car last night, and it looked like perhaps at the end of the race, if some of those guys had pitted towards the end, maybe it could have been Zane Smith's night, because he was doing his best to try to hold off Alex Bowman, who was in a must-win situation and had, 4 tires. Even though they were old, they were better than the 2 tires that Carson Hocevar had in front of him. It could have maybe been him in winning the race if those guys that, were still stretching it on their tires and fuel, they could, hadn't pitted yet. It could have maybe been Zane Smith the winner, but that wasn't the case with the caution late. He had to restart in the front row. He got alongside Hocevar, but unfortunately both on older tires washed up the racetrack and let the 20 car of Bell and the 6 of Keselowski go by. But Zane Smith was able to hold his position in 3rd place at the checkered flag. So close to his first career Cup Series win, but a very promising result for the 38 team, because it's really been a rough stretch of races for them lately, aside from a couple of times where they've had chances to maybe even have a top 5, top 10. This is a much needed result for the team. So close for a couple of guys last night. The veteran Keselowski trying to get back to victory lane, and Gibbs and Smith still looking for their first Cup Series win, but they gave it their best. Number 3, hanging on by a thread. The end of the night that we knew that 12 drivers would advance to the playoffs in the next round of these playoffs. And at the end of the night, 2 guys had to barely hang on the last couple laps of this race, either in the garage or on the racetrack running wounded, to make it to the next round of the playoffs. And they were Chase Elliott and Austin Cindric. Both had their problems last night, but both will advance to the next round of the playoffs. Kicking it off with Chase Elliott and the 9 team, they knew they had a 28-point cushion coming into this race, that all they needed was a couple of stage points, and nobody knew to win the race, and they felt like they would feel pretty confident in their ability to make it into the next round of the playoffs. Well, unfortunately, they were one of the many cars that got caught by the caution in the first stage when we had our cycle of green flag pit stops. He got caught a lap down, and it took him a while. He got his lap back at the end of the second stage. Then he put on a set of tires, and he was able to fight his way up inside the top 10. But then, going into turn number 3 with about under 200 laps to go, Elliott was getting shuffled by some guys on fresher tires, tried to slide his way in the line. But unfortunately, John Hunter Nemechek from behind had a huge run, and Nemechek drilled the back of the 9 car and sent 9 of Elliott up into the outside wall and take him out of the race. I couldn't believe what I saw. I'm thinking, a guy that was pretty comfortable at the moment, was about nearly 35 to 40 points above the cutoff line, is probably going to make it. He's got a wrecked race car, and if it's any of these guys that are in a must-win situation, particularly his teammate wins, Chase Elliott could be out. And he's never been eliminated in the first round of these playoffs. I mean, could you imagine the pressure that he had to sit through those final 100-plus laps of the race, wondering if he could have been knocked out? Because the points that he accumulated, thankfully, from last week at Gateway gave him the buffer he needed to still possibly point his way in, as long as nobody else knew won the race. But it was a tough, tense time for the 9 team to watch the end of those last couple laps last night after they got involved in a wreck. I mean, it's tough to tell who to blame, honestly, for that. I mean, the 9 cars getting shuffled out and tries to slide in line probably maybe a little too late, because the 42 behind has a big run, or Nemechek maybe could have lifted off a little bit, but unfortunately, he has Denny Hamlin all up in his back bumper. So a really tough night for the 9 cars. They suffered their second DNF. But thankfully, because we didn't have a new winner, they are able to make it to the next round of these playoffs. And the same goes for Austin Cindric, who it looked like, with about 100 laps to go, looks like his spot was safe. But then he took a gamble, or his crew chief took a gamble on that second to last pit stop by taking 2 tires. And after they made their pit stop, all of a sudden the right front wheel is burning with some fire. And it had a lot to do with the rubber buildup in these tires because of the tire fall we had getting into these brake rotors, and it caused the 2 right front wheel to catch on fire, and the smoke carried it into the cockpit. They had to bring it in, take the tire off, put a new set of tires on, get the fire extinguisher, put the fire out, and send it back out there. He lost a lot of spots in the track that had put him on the cutoff line in jeopardy in case Alex Bowman won the race. It would have knocked Cindric out instead of Chase Elliott. But thankfully for Cindric, nobody knew won the race, and he was able to make it to the next round of the playoffs. They probably didn't like it. I'll probably bet you they were sweating by their collars towards the end of that race, wondering if the 48 wins, we're out. But at the end of the night, Cindric does advance, and all 3 Penske cars still remain alive in this championship battle. So a tough night for Elliott and Cindric and their finishing results, but thankfully, both continue to pursue the Belfrance Cup. Number 4, end of the road. 4 drivers knew at the end of the night that they would see their playoff chances to try to win the championship go away. And last night, 4 men were eliminated from these playoffs. And they were Alex Bowman, Austin Dillon, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Josh Berry. Starting first with Alex Bowman. He didn't get the job done. But my golly, he gave it everything he could. And you can't say he didn't try. Alex Bowman came into this race knowing that he needed to win to make the playoffs after 2 awful performances based off of the rough cars that he had at Darlington and Gateway, and not to mention the pit crew. They let him down big time to the point where they swapped a couple members with the 77 team of Carson Hocevar early in the week to help the 48 team. I will say that move benefited them because they had much better pit stops on all their stops last night. And they had a pretty good car, but like many, they were caught by that first caution in the race after green flag pit stops. They got trapped a lap down, but then they got their lap back, and then he found himself inside the top 5, top 10, competing up at the front of the pack for a lot of the night. Well, actually, also, while a lap down, they got spun out while on the apron of the racetrack underneath of Riley Herbst, but thankfully only stayed 1 lap down. He got his lap back, and when he did get his lap back, he got up inside the top 5, top 10, and had a very, very fast race car, and a car that was capable of running with the front. And Alex Bowman has typically had some good runs here at Bristol, as long as you give him the cars and the track position. And when the 9 car fell out of the race, I mean, it was possible that Alex Bowman could win his way into the playoffs and knock out his teammate, but the possibility of him maybe pointing his way in, but really in all cases still needing a win, came late when Cindric had his problems. Alex Bowman tried everything he could last night, changing those tires whenever he needed to try to gain more track position and put himself in a possible spot to try to win the race. But unfortunately, when that late race yellow came out, and they were stuck behind Zane Smith and Carson Hocevar regardless, they knew that they were in trouble. And the one thing that also really hurt Alex Bowman was on restarts last night. He missed turn 1 every time he was either on the bottom of the racetrack or the top of the racetrack. It seems like the car would just carry up the track and just miss the corner and force him to lose a ton of spots. And on that last restart, even with the old tires on, it really hurt him, and he had to drop back from the field and finish in 8th spot. And unfortunately, Alex Bowman will not advance into these playoffs. But I give the 48 team a lot of credit to make the swap with the pit crew members early in the week, to bringing a very fast car and almost having a chance to win. I got to give them their props. They may not have made it, but they gave it their best, and I say that's still a job well done by the 48 team. Then you go to Austin Dillon. Really wasn't a factor for a lot of the night. Like many, they were caught by that caution early on in the race and fell multiple laps down, because I think he actually made another pit stop and put him behind 3 laps, and he never really was able to recover from that. Never took the opportunity to even take some waiver rounds, even when we had a lot of cautions in the race. Something might have been really wrong with that race car that was preventing them from having the opportunity to take the waiver rounds and compete and try to get by some of the guys they were on the same lap on. In case we had more yellows, he could have found himself back in the lead lap, and even a top 10 possibly could have helped Dillon point his way in. But the end of the night, the 3 team, they didn't get the job done, but at least they make the playoffs this year the right way by winning cleanly at Richmond, and not like what happened at the end of last year's race. But they got a little bit of work to do still with the RCR program, but it was at least Dillon got them in the playoffs, and probably the only positive thing I could take away from that. Then Shane Van Gisbergen, he had a playoffs to forget, folks. He struggled at Darlington, struggled last weekend at Gateway where he got caught up in an incident, and last night he was the cause of 2 cautions when he spun around in the corners after getting contact with somebody or losing it on his own. To be perfectly honest, the 88 car, they were just not up to par last night. Didn't have the speed, didn't have the track position, just didn't really have a good handle on their race car last night. But it is mighty impressive to see a rookie in his first full year in the Cup Series make the playoffs after winning all these road course races we've had, minus Circuit of the Americas. SVG is a prominent road course racer, and he will continue to be as long as he remains in the Cup Series. And I know that he's out of the playoffs, but guarantee you, when we get to that Roval in a few weeks, he will be part of the story and could play spoiler in dictating who makes it to the next round of the playoffs in the round of 8 versus who's going to be in the bottom 4 after the Roval and be eliminated from the championship battle. But a tough end for Shane Fitzgerald's first round of the playoffs, but he still had a very good season nonetheless. And then finally, Josh Berry. They're probably glad that these playoffs are done. Absolutely nothing went right for them. As a matter of fact, they were like part of the first few cautions of every playoff race. The opening lap, turn 2 at Darlington, gets loose, goes around, hits the wall, goes to the garage, has to repair it, comes back out, still finished the race, but in dead last. Gets caught up in an unfortunate incident last week where Chase Elliott gets loose on the inside of 1 and 2, and Berry, unfortunately, is just tucked up on him, and then he gets tapped and goes around, hits the outside wall. He knew coming in, like Alex Bowman, he was in a must-win situation. Now, at the beginning of the race, he actually was moving up and got himself inside the top 10, and it sounded like he was going to have himself a really good night. And Josh Berry is a really good short track racer. But that all came to an end in the middle of those green flag pit stops in the first stage when Josh Berry had a right front tire catch on fire. The same problem that would happened to Austin Cindric late in the night. It first happened to Josh Berry to the point where so much smoke got in the cockpit that they had to pull him out of there. And I know there's probably like, you're going to eliminate him for the race. Yeah, well, you don't want all that smoke getting inside the driver. It'll hurt their carbon monoxide levels, and when that smoke gets into your lungs and everything, it can really affect you, and we don't want that. And thankfully the 21 team was able to get Berry out of the car. He was okay. Ultimately though, his playoff dreams to advance the next round were officially done. Then they're probably glad that this round's over, and all the things they could just do now, try to finish the year strong, because ever since their Vegas win, it's been a rough stretch of races for a lot of the time, except for the back-to-back top 10s at Richmond and Daytona to close out the regular season. But a really tough first round of the playoffs for Josh Berry and the Wood brothers, so hopefully they can finish the year strong. But those 4 drivers, Bowman, Dillon, SVG, and Berry, see their championship dreams come to an end. And number 5, the action. Folks, the Bristol night race the last couple of years have been really tough to watch. Last night, I did not expect that at all. But my golly, what a show we had last night. Amazing racing all night long with this short track racing. And I know that the short track package, particularly for this next gen cars, we've been trying to find a balance between tire wear and racing that'll make it entertaining, not just for the drivers, but also for the fans. We got that last night. With the cooling track conditions that we had, the PJ1 on the bottom, we didn't put any resin on the racetrack. We saw a lot of tire issues last night with a lot of wear, to the point where these guys, after 25 to 30 laps into a green flag run, these guys were coming on the pit road because they're complaining, my lap time's falling off big, I've got some tires going down, I gotta get in pit road right now. A lot of that shaked up the running order in the first part of the race in that first stage when everybody started to duck on the pit road. Then a few more guys ducked on, then we had that caution for the 21's fire, and then we had more positions change back and forth a lot of the night because of tire wear, and because a lot of these guys were trying to get in their lanes with the tires that they had versus older tires, and there would be a couple of cautions. But that was absolutely outstanding all night long. I mean, we saw this happen last year in the spring race at Bristol, and it was a day race, but it was also a day where we had partly cloudy skies, then we had cloudy, and then mostly cloudy at the end of the race. It was a day where it was very, very cold, and we didn't put any resin on the track. We had the PJ1, and we had tire wear that was absolutely out of this world. Seeing these guys lose a lot of spots because their tires are falling off. The same thing happened last night in the race. After a very, very tough race to watch earlier in the spring, this night race last night made up for that by a country mile. It was absolutely amazing to watch these guys go back and forth, and seeing the drama of some of these guys that had a chance to make it to the next round of the playoffs with a win, like Alex Bowman per se, or guys just trying to hang on and hope that they make it, like a Chase Elliott or an Austin Cindric, and guys trying to get their first win, a Ty Gibbs, a Carson Hocevar, a Zane Smith. or a veteran like Brad Keselowski trying to win, or Christopher Bell trying to win for the first time since March. I mean, seeing these guys going back and forth, all the changing of positions, all the comers and goers, and all this tire wear. Yes, there were a lot of cautions for a lot of wrecks in the second stage, which kind of slowed the pace down. But for the most part, last night's Bristol night race, we got the magic back last night. I mean, I hope we can have this going forward, knowing that the softer tire we bring and cooling temperatures could be the solution to great short track racing at Bristol with this next gen car. We hope to have that next spring, and with it being in, late March, it's possible that we could have the same type of race that we had last night, come back in the spring, but that remains to be seen. But in general, that night race last night, magnifique, awesome, outstanding. That was awesome. So the round of 16 is officially done. We are on to a new round, the round of 12, and it kicks off next week at the Magic Mile in New Hampshire, the 1 mile flat track, which provides some interesting challenges between track position as well as possibly tire management. The first time that New Hampshire's been in the playoffs since, if I remember this correctly, 2017, when we had 2 races back then. It's going to be really interesting to see how these guys can adapt to the track temperatures in a cooler environment this time with the next-gen car versus when we've been running it the past couple years in the summer. So what will we see next week? Will we see a playoff driver punch their ticket to the round of 8 next weekend, or could somebody else play spoiler? And I'm going to say this to all the playoff drivers, even guys 20 points above. We have no clear favor right now. And nobody's safe in these playoffs, especially with that Roval being the elimination race in this upcoming round. So you better put your A game on, and if you make one mistake, you're going to be done. So we'll wait and see what happens, but I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like, and congrats once again to Christopher Bell and the 20 team on their win in the night race at Bristol. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing!